Is this going to be like a 38-17 type of signature blowout win against what should be a weaker NFC opponent? Or is this going to be a game where we're sweating it out in the fourth quarter and we potentially lose or win by a field goal, like a 20-17 game? Well, we got a football game on Sunday?
We got a football game on Sunday.
My mama's very sick, and I won't be able to play the bourbon bowl. Well, wake her ass up. We've got a game to win.
Welcome back to another edition of The House That Ellen Built. This is episode 43. I'm Scott Kinmartin. With me almost always is
Greg Vollmer.
And today we're going to discuss the Buffalo Bills going to the Washington Commanders. It's about a 6-hour drive, I'd say. And that's going to be Sunday, September 24th at 1 p.m. Eastern. Bills are 6.5-point favorites. The Washington Commanders are 2-0. The Bills are 1-1. As we know, they fell in overtime on the season opener, Monday Night Football, and then they crushed the Raiders by 28 points. Whereas the Commanders have had two very close games. They were within a score. They are ranked pretty well for a Ron Rivera team that last year finished 7-10. They are 11th in passing, 16th in rushing, 13th overall. So yeah, they're in a tough division. NFC East, 2-0 Dallas, 2-0 Philly, and 2-0 Washington. So
yeah, the wrong teams 2-0 that everyone would have expected to be at this young point in the season. And Bills Mafia will be packing their ponchos and rain jackets for this game because there's a potential system moving through courtesy of a hurricane front that will potentially affect this game, which I don't like. Anytime there's severe weather affecting the game, I just don't like it.
That's not what you want at all, but they've proven they could run the ball. James Cook had 123 yards last week. Like you said, the weather does kind of worry me some, but I feel like maybe we'll see more Allen's legs on the ground in between the 20s, maybe not so much in the red zone, which is why they have Murray and Harris. But if we're comparing our offense to their offense, we've got Josh Allen. They've got Sam Howell, who's a second-year quarterback. He only started one game last year as a rookie. I believe he comes from North Carolina.
Fun fact, the podcast. And I didn't just read this on an article before we got on live here. Sean McDermott is 7-0 against quarterbacks with 5 games or less experience going into Sunday's game.
I remember when Belichick was like that, where he's still like that after 25 years coaching, however many, 30 years, if you count the Browns. He just exposes these young guys who, even if they're phenomenal, it's what's between the ears where they're still learning to have the game slow down and process what's going on around them. Good for McDermott. I'm glad.
I've been a little hot and cold on McDermott over the last, umpteenth months. Like with just the 13 seconds thing, I allude back to it and my kind of lack of trust from that game and how it was handled with the media. And I say it was kind of shoved under the rug, with who took the blame for that. And there was no perfect way to handle that. With all that said, McDermott does deserve some praise for what he's done. And we've talked about that in podcasts with how he's turned the franchise around. It's his 100th game as a Bills head coach. And he has as of now, going into his 100th game as the head coach of the Buffalo Bills, he has a higher winning percentage than Marv Levy, which obviously less games, but another interesting fact going into this battle at FedEx.
Yeah, this is, it says the Bills will head to FedEx Field for the first time under Sean McDermott. And they have an 8-1 record against Washington in their last 9 games dating back to 1993. Stephon Diggs actually went to school 40 minutes from FedEx Field. We would be playing against former Buffalo Bill Logan Thomas, but he is out with concussion. And Washington has Jamison Crowder, which they've had him in the past and they have him again, but I don't even know if he's going to be active. Since 2020, Stephon Diggs has had 136 receptions for 1,110 yards receiving and 7 touchdowns. And that's against NFC opponents. So he also had 164 yards against Washington last time he faced them in 2016 with the Vikings.
And Washington's secondary continues to be a point of potential weakness. They've got some young guys in that secondary. It's their defensive front that's the biggest worry. And how our offensive line is going to handle it, specifically Spencer Brown, after having a game in which he got some flowers delivered to him, and rightly so. All eyes will be on him once again, as his hands will be full with not just one person. Last week it was kind of one person that they were focused on in Crosby. This time it's going to be four first round defensive end and tackles that are going to be wreaking havoc. And this will be the biggest test in this young season for the Bills O-line.
That's going to be probably the biggest test for any team facing the Commanders this year, because they have 4 first round picks from 2017, 18, 19, 20. They've invested first round picks in their defensive line. So Chase Young as left defensive end, first round pick 2020. Deron Payne, left defensive tackle, 2018. Jonathan Allen, right defensive tackle, I think 2017, and then Montez Sweat 2019 as right defensive end. It's just scary, because if you look at the rest of their defense, it's really not that threatening. Like you said, we can expose them in the secondary.
It's if Allen has enough time.
That's why I think rolling him out, he does better on the run. It doesn't matter left or right side, really. He's worked on going left or right. Our run containment was really good against Jacobs, and if we can hold their two-headed monster in Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson, we can contain them from not breaking 80-yard runs, then we might be all right. But on offense, Josh Allen needs to just play smart again, take what the defense gives him.
Keep padding up that completion percentage.
Yeah, I mean, when you're in the 80s, you're doing something right. Having Kincaid as a weapon again with at least 6 or 7 targets. Knox was a little banged up with the back, but the injury report on Thursday had 9 or 10 players on it. And as of today, they're all cleared. So everyone's going to play. Obviously, Von Miller's still on PUP for a couple more weeks minimum. But that is a very good sign, considering we had Spencer Brown with the shoulder issue. We had Dawson Knox with the back issue. We had Hyde with the hamstring injury, which it looks like it's still there, but it's something he can play through. He was a full participant. Hoyer looked a lot better in the second game as opposed to the first game. Maybe they didn't lose a full step or two like we were thinking. Age gets all of us. I'm 41. I can't imagine trying to be out there against guys in their 20s that run a 4.2, 4.3 40. It's just insane. To go back to Sam Howell, it's his second year. He's had 2 games this year and 1 last year. So he's only started 3 games in his career out of North Carolina. And he's actually got similar numbers to Josh Allen right now. They both have about 500 yards. Josh has 4 touchdowns with 3 interceptions, and Howell has 3 TDs, so 1 interception. So Washington has 3 main wide receivers, and I know Greg is fond of one of them. I think he has him on his fantasy team, so go ahead.
They got Scary Terry McLaurin, who has produced 1,000-yard seasons without a true quarterback one. They've got Jahan Dotson, who's a 3rd rounder. That is stepped up and has been a great complimentary role, although he's had a very slow start this young. We're only 2. I act like we're halfway through the season. We're starting week 3. For all intents and purposes, he's had a slow start this season statistically, but he's a talent. He could be a wide receiver 1 on probably 70% of the teams. And then Curtis Samuel, who is a vet that struggled with injuries off and on again, but has been known to flash. So they do have weapons.
They also have Jamison Crowder, who they drafted, and he was there for 4 years. Then he went to the Jets, and then he bounced around. The Bills had him for a cup of coffee. They have Byron Pringle. I'm not sure who's actually going to be playing as wide receiver. They're listed as kick return and punt return and depth wide receiver. As you know, Crowder is more of a slot receiver, and he got banged up when we had him. So we'll see. They have a lot of weapons on offense. They have the big guys up front on defense. We just need to show up and play our best and win by more than a touchdown, and I'll be happy.
They've got Brian Robinson, who I wish I would have taken instead of Dameon Pierce in fantasy.
Well, you also drafted Antonio Gibson, didn't you?
I wanted to. I had him very heavily, like on my draft boards. I had him as a target, and it looks like that wouldn't have been a great decision so far. Could change. And you never know. Fantasy's insane. I mean, you could have, there's injuries, it's a long season, but as of now, Brian Robinson's the person to have in that backfield from a fantasy perspective.
Oh, here's an interesting fact. James Cook has 169 yards rushing, and Stephon Diggs has 168 yards receiving. Yeah, so all-purpose yards, James Cook is leading the pack.
That's a nice little stat there.
And Josh Allen has 510 yards. Like I said, Sam Howell, I think, was 500 on the dot, or 499, something like that. They're a decent team. We should respect them. And obviously, we got to mention that Ron Rivera is the tree that McDermott comes from. And when they were in Carolina, Brandon Beane was assistant GM there for over a decade. There's a lot, to be said between them. There's a lot of respect. But remember the weird thing that happened with JD McKissick?
Brandon Bean sure remembers it.
Yeah, he's not even relevant anymore. He's not even playing on game day. So, for those of you that may not know what we're talking about, we had an agreement to sign McKissick, and he was going to be what we thought was our missing piece as far as having like an escape for Josh Allen out of the backfield for screens and all that kind of stuff. He's just a quick, shifty guy that would have helped us out for sure. But he decided to stay in Washington, which is respectable. But after he made a decision, he reneged on it. And that was kind of the part where we're like, whoa.
Well, the GM was at fault too, the way he handled it with Brandon Bean.
All right. So let's get into maybe key matchups. So what you think? I mean, I would say Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis have an opportunity to expose their secondary. As far as us in our secondary, they're going to have their hands full, whether it's Taylor Rapp out there as a third safety, or if they have a third linebacker out there, which is Dotson was out there. Did you know that against the Raiders, when we allowed that touchdown, Dotson was out there in a 3 linebacker set? I saw number 25 out there. I'm like, who the hell is 25? And it said Dotson on the back of his jersey. So he changed his number when whoever was wearing 25. I know it used to be
the whole number change thing throws your brain off, because you see numbers where you're like, that should be a running back number or a cornerback number, and it's a linebacker or a defensive tackle.
When wide receivers started wearing quarterback numbers, I found that weird, because you always saw them in like the 80s, and defensive ends were 90s, and linemen were 60s and 70s, and linebackers were 40s and 50s, and then you've got a linebacker wearing 25, which is typically a running back number. Mm-hmm. And now you've got number 0 out there. Whatever. Maybe I'm just old, but it's not what I'm used to. And it's weird. We're not college, and, we don't have players wearing the same number on offense and defense, because there's over 100 players on some rosters. If we look at a team comparison on offense, you've got the Bills scoring the 8th most points per game, and Washington with 7th most. 27 and 27.5 points. And as far as points against, our defense is 5th. Mind you, it's only 2 games. Our defense has averaged 16 points allowed per game, where they're averaging 24.5 points per game, which is 17. Total yards per game, obviously we racked them up against the Raiders. We are averaging 395 a game. They're averaging 358. So we're 7th best. They're 13th best. It's a little different. I know I go over these numbers more so. It's more like it gives us a better idea when we're halfway through the season and we have a bigger sample size. Yeah. But at least you have an idea of what they're doing so far. Like our passing yards against, we're 6th, they're 11th, but that's 44 yards difference in a game. I mean, we had the ball for most of the third quarter. Maybe that's those extra 44 yards, and it has nothing to do with shutting them down, but them having less plays on offense. They had 39 plays last week, the Raiders, that is. Rushing yards, we were very effective in week 2. Week 1, not as much. So we're averaging 140 yards a game. They're averaging 107. Now they've got 2 bona fide running backs. They're using one more as a receiver, but you're going to have that where we haven't really been doing screen passes or much with Cook as far as that goes, but he's fully capable of it. And I know Harris and Murray have both had experience doing that. So we're again 7th, they're 16th. Sacks. This is where we're different. As you know, we only have 3 sacks on the year in 2 games. That came in game 1. We got to be careful because Washington is leading the league in sacks. In 2 games, they have 10 sacks.
Keep your eyes peeled on Spencer Brown on Sunday when I'm going to be delivering Amazon packages all over Madison, Wisconsin. Keep your eyes peeled for me on Spencer Brown and see how he handles this rush, because he did great last week. Let's see if he does it 2 weeks in a row.
I'm not just worried about Spencer Brown. We've got to worry about Osiris Torrance maybe continuing to have a stellar rookie season. Maybe, the defensive line like this, we're not going to be able to chip as much. They only rush 4. They're going to be more effective than most teams that are rushing 5. That leaves 7 deep for them, which means it is a little harder. Even if there are no name corners or whoever filling in or safety, I would say you still got to respect them and do what you can, run a good route, have good schemes. This is going to show what Ken Dorsey can do as far as good reads for Josh and then having, chipping down the field again. Our time of possession was great. So far this year, we're actually first in the league thanks to having the ball for 40 minutes out of 60 last week. We are first with 36.5 minutes per game, whereas Washington is 9th with 32.5 minutes. That's 4 minutes. 2 2-minute drives. If you do a 2-minute drill at the end of the first half and the end of the game and you score on both of them or at least get field goals, I mean, scores are scores. If you can rack up your points, we'll get to the predictions. I do want to know what you think of that. We have more interceptions. We have 3, which gives us third place right now so far in interceptions. They only have 1, so that's 11th. That's the comparison for offense and defense without getting into every single name on the roster. What is your biggest matchup outside of Spencer Brown to look for?
It's going to be Dalton Kincaid. I want to see how he continues to progress. I want to see him be more involved in the passing game. And I know part of that's maybe impatience, because we had to spend the whole offseason like thinking about this whole hype train, started building the steam, this momentum about what he could look like with this 12 personnel, which we're starting to use heavily. We're kind of just like we're kind of grooming him, and it's not just immediately trying to release the Ferrari out of the garage type of a thing. And I respect that. I think I'm very curious to see kind of what kind of a game he has on Sunday. It was going to be an interesting thing from a fantasy perspective if Dawson Knox didn't play on Sunday. Obviously, it's good that he is playing. He's clearly, it was a back issue. It wasn't as serious as what was thought. So yeah, I think I'm interested in seeing how Dawson Knox continues to progress within Dorsey's scheme, and I think that's going to be a year-long thing to kind of just see how he comes along. And he's got, you can't help but think that he's going to have a major role in this offense at some point as the season progresses, whether it's playoff time or whether it's halfway through the season or 3/4 of the way through the season.
I think those are great things to be looking at. Kincaid should continue to progress. I do think that the comparisons to Kelsey, although we have to slow our roll with that and our excitement, he's showing all the signs that he has that potential. And I'm excited each week watching him play well, block well. Just, he looks like a total package. And then you've got Osiris Torrance that we got in the second round. So first and second round picks are both doing really well, where a lot of people thought that we were going to draft Osiris. And
I think I'm more concerned about Spencer Brown on Sunday than I am about a rookie.
Yeah. I mean, we have Connor McGovern that we got from the Cowboys. He's, no one's talking about him, so he's obviously doing just fine. Dawkins is doing fine. Any one of them against these 4 are going to be on their toes and could get blown up. And Allen could be doing more of the sugar rush, sugar high Allen from week 1. I do think when they're rushing that and you get a quick little chip from Kincaid or something on the end, or you have a running back rolling out, that's where you dink and dunk those 5 or 10 yards. And that's the name of the game. I mean, you're playing chess out there.
And with how aggressive the defensive line can be for Washington and how potentially weak some of their backfield, their secondary can be, wouldn't that be a time to try to do the screen game where you have Allen kind of back up and let them try to come towards him and then dish it out?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that. And that's what I'm hoping for. It should be that. Josh Allen's historically been very good against the NFC. In 21 games against the NFC, he's 16-5. So, I mean, that's great. Over 5,000 yards and 43 touchdowns. He's posted with a 96 QBR.
That's impressive.
He's also collected 3 AFC Offensive Players of the Week honors versus the NFC, twice in 2020 and once in 2021. So nothing stands. So we'll see. You remember I talked about some familiar faces with Stephon Diggs having gone to high school 40 miles away. Well, Deontay Hardy also went to Archbishop Curley, not far from there. Christian Benford's from the area. Tim Settle used to play for the Commanders, and Kyle Allen, who's our backup, used to play for the Commanders. Here's one. Here's a fact I had no idea about. The Commanders GM, Martin Mayhew, he was a 10th round, 262nd overall pick for the Buffalo Bills.
No shit.
1988. Yep.
Wow.
There are connections between these
the year
teams.
I was born.
You dated yourself there. But yeah, I'm 82, so I can't say anything. So our play-by-play on CBS is going to be Andrew Catalan. I like him. I think he does a good job. And then color analyst will be Tiki Barber and Matt Ryan. So we'll see how that goes. Sideline reporter is AJ Ross. For the WGR 550 side, you're going to have Chris Brown, who I think does really well. He fills in for John Murphy perfectly.
He's always at 100, and I joke about it. And it's tongue-in-cheek because I respect him, obviously. And everything he does for the Bills media and for the WGR and for being a journalist and all that. He's always on 100. Like, he's very 100. Everything he says during the game is on 100, and that's he brings a lot of energy. It's just there's no ups and downs, and there's no variance. That's just the way he calls games, and it's something that's for me. taken some getting used to. And I guess Murphy, I don't know, it's been so long since I've heard Murphy's voice, to be honest.
It feels like a long time, but it was right around the DeMar Hamlin time, because I believe John Murphy ended up having a stroke and he's still recovering from that. Now, he's made a couple appearances at One Bills Drive, but as far as him doing calls anymore, he might not be able to. I loved hearing him out there, and I actually liked One Bills Live was originally the John Murphy show. And they brought on Steve Tasker, who ended up becoming his co-host and then ended up being the one that anchored the show, while they brought on other people like Matty Glab and then Chris Brown. And then ultimately they chose Chris Brown to be permanent anchor there with Tasker. Tasker obviously could have chosen CBS. He was doing TV for decades and he chose to stay home. He's got kids and grandkids, and he made the wise choice of just sticking around in the Buffalo area and doing the show right there in studio. And I think it's cool. And then with Chris Brown having all of that energy, you've got Eric Wood doing the color commentary, and he's a more calm analyst who obviously brings 9 years of experience from on the field. He knows a bit about McDermott. It's a good dynamic between the two of them.
I'm a Joe Schmo speaking on someone that's got way more experience in broadcasting than I do, and it's just my perception of it is just that it's very he's so high energy, but at times it's almost too much. But that's also maybe could just be me being nitpicky.
I think that's fine. You're welcome to have that opinion, and not everyone actually. There are some people that don't like him because of that extra energy. They feel like it's forced. But knowing him, because I've followed his coverage before he was on the show, and I actually have always liked him. I like people like him and Joe Buscaglia, and obviously Joe Marino is just really good at doing a coverage daily. You've got the Cover One guys. I mean, there's so many people now that do content creation for the Bills, or not even for them. They just cover them as content creators on the internet like we do, but with a much bigger following. I like it all. I like that we have our own little takes here and there. Of course, we'll listen to WGR and we'll follow the Bills PR reports and we'll see the media stuff. But I always try to look through and decipher the numbers, as you know, and I'll write up things that other people don't necessarily talk about, or I'll compare Josh Allen's first 6 years to Jim Kelly's, or the trajectory Jim Kelly played for 11 seasons. And then, wait a minute, Josh Allen after 6 is, if you double his numbers, he's going to far surpass Kelly if he keeps going. So the idea is that, like, I'm always comparing players and lineups and matchups, and it's good. You and I bring a different thing to the table. You're getting into it from a different perspective. I'm more analytical, and you're more like, you bring in the fantasy football talk and the
overreaction Mondays. Looks like someone's got a case of the Monday.
Oh, well, that's why we love you, man. That's why we have you here. And I think that even though we can't do this in person, I do enjoy doing this regardless. And the one episode 40, I think it was, where I just did like an 8-minute preview before the Raiders game, and my prediction, I was like 30-13, and the game ended up being 38-10. But I asked you before the game started through text, not in the podcast, but I was like, what do you think? And you said 34-10. And when it got to 10 before halftime, I'm like, so we're going to shut them out in the second half? And I'm like, you laughed at it. And then we did. You got the prices right there with your prediction.
Speaking of WGR, the on like, how WGR kind of splits in like moments of their, either like during that week, like a little excerpt from like one of their interviews or someone said in a little soundbite. One of their sound bites this week just caught me. Like when I heard it, it made me feel at peace, and I wanted to bring it up. Unfortunately, I should have done my research and found out who the gentleman is that says it. But he's talking about the Bills, and he goes, the way that Matt Milano is playing and the way that this defense is getting pressure on the quarterback, you add in Von Miller coming back to that, and pretty much he's saying like, this is scary. Like, the sky's the limit. I'm paraphrasing. And it just put me at peace. Like, it made me feel, as much as we all wanted to see Von Miller start the season week 1, I feel this odd sense of comfort that he didn't start, that we have him in our back pocket. Like, the war of attrition that is the NFL, and it's a game that humans weren't meant to play. And we get reminded of that when we watch injuries like to Nick Chubb. I just watched the Badgers play Purdue tonight, and Chaz Malusi, the running back 2 on the Badgers, probably broke his ankle. You watch the game and it's brutal, it's vicious. And so with just everything that can happen, I feel at peace. We're taking it the smart route and the slow route with Von Miller. We're waiting to unleash him because of what happened last year. Because it's like, yeah, we had him for half the season, and what's the point of having one of the best, edge rushers? He's going to be a future Hall of Famer for half a season. But I just, the way he explained it, and then that soundbite where he's like, if this Bills pass rush continues to get pressure with Floyd and Oliver and Rousseau as the anchors, and the rest fill in on rotation, and you get Milano playing out of his mind, and then you bring in Von Miller halfway through the season, and you have a Josh Allen that's hopefully not making mistakes and not going back 2019 wild card Houston Texan Allen, the sky is the limit. And hearing that throughout this week on WGR, every time I heard it, it's like I just felt this like warmth, and I'm like, oh, that makes me feel the tingles of like what could be. It's all what could be, right? We know that because nothing's guaranteed. But anyways, I just wanted to mention that.
Obviously, Von Miller is a integral part of the team, not just as a veteran leader, but on the field. I mean, we've only had him for 10 and a quarter games last year, and he had 8 sacks. And it wasn't even just about the sacks. It was about bringing out the best of everyone else. And Rousseau played his best when people are double teaming Miller and focusing on him, and you've got him over there just like grooting it out, manhandling people. It's going to be exciting to see him back.
In 10 games. Can you imagine if he would have played 17 games? Can you imagine?
I can imagine, and maybe that'll happen next year when he's 34. I don't know.
We just need him for 12 games this year,
and we will have him probably for about the same as we had last year, at the right part of the season, not losing him when we need him most,
That's what I'm saying. I don't know. I keep on going back and forth about what to expect with this game. You think about the weather. I don't like this whole potential hurricane front that's moving in. The weather is always a damper on things, not only for fans, for tailgating, for the quality of football, for injuries. Is this going to be like a 38-17 type of signature blowout win against what should be a weaker NFC opponent? Or is this going to be a game where we're sweating it out in the fourth quarter and we potentially lose or win by a field goal, like a 20-17 game? I don't know. It's fascinating. I think that's part of the intrigue going into this week. You've got a Sam Howell who's playing for all intents and purposes for what this Washington Commander team has gone through, and their shitty former owner and all the heartache they've gone through. He's looking like Joe Montana to this fan base. So I don't know. There's a lot of intrigue going into this game, and it all starts with, can Allen protect the ball, and can the offensive line protect Allen? And also, how good is this 4 first rounders on the defensive line for the Commanders going to look? There's a lot going on here.
I did a little Googling real quick, and Bills versus Commanders betting records and stats. I'm going to provide those for you now. In 11 of 16 games last season, the Bills and their opponents scored more than 43 points in 11 out of 16. That's pretty good. Buffalo has an average point total of 47.7 in its contest last season, 4.7 more points than the over and under for this game. And against the spread, the Bills were 7-8 last season. The Bills were favored in every game they played last year. Buffalo has a 10-1 record last year, winning 90.9% of its games when playing as a money line favorite of -275 or shorter. As far as Washington Commanders, they combine with their opponents to score more than 43 points in 5 of the last 17 games. So they're obviously not as high-powered of an offense. And Washington had a 41.8 points average over-under in its matchup last season, 1.2 points fewer than this game's point total. The Commanders are underdogs in 8 games last season and won 4 of those. They're underdogs at home by 6.5. They have a record of 2-1 in games where odds makers had them as underdogs of at least plus 225 on the money line. So it's like, can't both win.
I hate to go back to Monday Night Football, but did you happen to catch the stuff before the game started when they interviewed Josh Allen? Like the pregame special with Josh Allen?
No, honestly, I didn't even know that they had it because I was actually watching the little one and I missed it.
I didn't catch it either. I was finishing up work and trying to rush home, and I barely made it with 20 minutes to spare. Josh Allen mentioned how Buffalo is one of the last feel-good sports stories. They're like the Boston Red Sox before they, with their drought before they won it, or the White Sox, or the Kansas City Royals, or what was the biggest drought in baseball? The 100-year drought. Was that
It was the Chicago Cubs.
Chicago, yes. Geez. Okay. Thank you. Chicago Cubs. Anyways, Allen was quoted saying something along the lines of what keeps him motivated past just being a motivated competitive person that wants to be an MVP. And well, first of all, I think his biggest motivation is, I think it is leading, even though I dogged on him after the week one and said is that he's not the most motivated he's been ever or focused on football.
The photo you shared with me from Josh Allen at what looked like a mall with Haley Steinfeld, they were looking at rings, and that was the meme you created, right?
Yes. A fan that had a, eagle eye at a mall or whatever, or at a place in Toronto, Canada, spotted Josh Allen and Haley Staley Heinfield.
Haley Steinfeld.
And so I said, I'm focused more on a ring than I've ever been, as he's peeking down in the jewelry. Haley Steinfeld.
That was brilliant. And I knew you were the one who created that. I mean, I could tell based on the formatting.
Based on the fact that I just use Snapchat formatting to make my meme. So yeah, going back. So ultimately what happened is just, it's cool. It is cool. A lot of Bills fans know I bring this up every once in a while. Allen has a specific bottle of whiskey on his top shelf that he won't let anyone touch. Like when he throws parties with football with fellow teammates and has people over, like he'll let people have what he refers to as brown water, and he'll share his whiskey. But there is one bottle of whiskey he will have no one touch, and that is what he is reserving for when he brings a Super Bowl to the city. And I do look, I talked a lot of shit after his week one, and I don't want to say I feel bad about it, but because I want to be critical. I want to be critical when there needs to be, when it needs to happen with him, and not always be a complete fanboy of Josh Allen just because we're a Bills fan. But
yeah.
But he does. He's got a bottle reserved for when he wants to bring a Super Bowl to the city. And in a nutshell, paraphrasing, he pretty much just said that Buffalo and the city and its fans and the whole fucking history dating back to the 4 Super Bowl losses is one of the last feel-good sports stories we have. And I think that's awesome, because it is, like, unless you just don't like Buffalo, for whatever reason, whether you're like in the AFC East as a fan, which I get it. But there are a lot of people that are rooting for the team outside of Buffalo now. And you got a lot of people that aren't. But like I said, unless you've got your reasons, it is one of the last feel-good stories. Yeah, I guess what more motivation do you need than that? Waking up every Sunday or Monday or Thursday, hoping that we can get a first seed or just make the playoffs or just try to go on a run. But we're one of the last potential feel-good stories. And I think we're sick of being the potential feel-good story. We want to be the feel-good story and not have a 13 seconds or these countless mishaps that stop us from getting the 1 seed. Like we're ready. We're ready. We want it so badly.
I think it helps when you have likable players and coaches. As much as Diggs gets smeared by social media, he's over there throwing the ball pregame and postgame, and he's smiling, and most of the time he's really happy. Josh Allen's in all these national commercials and plastered on the cover of Madden, Paramount Plus, the Verizon wireless commercials. He's just Gillette. Yep, he's in Gillette. He's in a number of them. And then McDermott, he's a likable coach. I mean, albeit a bit boring and safe, but he's a good coach, and players rally around him. He's a former safety and a wrestler, and a guy that went to college with Mike Tomlin and worked under Ron Rivera and Andy Reid, and I think those are all good things.
I hold a grudge with McDermott for that 13 seconds thing, and maybe not. Maybe it's unfair, but I do. I hold a certain grudge with him.
I know ultimately it was his decision, but maybe Les Frazier isn't there for a reason. Maybe McDermott's learning to hold himself accountable. Notice the defense hasn't really had any issues. Yeah, they let an 83-yard run go on a misalignment, which is probably more the players on the field at the time than it is the coach. Maybe they can catch it in the moment, but he's doing a lot of things, and he's got an assistant head coach, and he's got all these other guys that are there to help him. But I feel like he's learned each year, as much as we've had those hiccups in the 13 seconds and the overtime, whatever. All those things are still something that taints his record from the past, but he can wipe all that if we get a Lombardi. And that's the ultimate goal. And that's where I think they're headed. whether it be this season or when the new stadium comes out or in our lifetime. I feel like Josh Allen is so much more likable than Jim Kelly ever was. And Kelly was my idol as a kid, even though I called him Jim Smelly when he threw picks, and he just looked like an idiot sometimes out there. And he had this, not a mullet, but it was pretty damn close. I always thought, he's a good guy, but he also had been caught cheating on his wife, and he never made like the national headlines like you would now in social media, like Allen does. But he was a good guy and a Hall of Famer and somebody that represents our Mount Rushmore. Anyway, my point is I like the team. I like the coach. I feel like we're doing good things. We have a great chance this weekend. We're obviously going on the road playing a team that's very good on the defensive front. They've got weapons on offense, and it'll be a good matchup, good challenge. I'm hoping we come away 2-1 and continue to go in the right direction and go 1-0 each week for the rest of the season.
Are you going to make your buffalo chicken dip?
Because I didn't make it last time, I probably will. Although I want to go to the Cheerful Bullpen. I've been telling Amy, the owner there, the Bills Backers Bar in Portland, she's been reserving a table for me, and I haven't made it the first 2 weeks because we had Monday Night Football, and then we had I hosted for Raiders fans that couldn't end up making it. I want to go there. It's just not the same without you there, and Jeff and Ricardo aren't going all the time.
You get Brant, get Jeff, get Ricardo, convince them to come.
Okay, let's get down to the nitty-gritty here. I want to know your prediction. What do you expect this game to be?
I feel like there's a lot of pressure on me after getting so close on the Price is Right style last week. I'm going to go 31-21 Bills.
I'm going to go, you said 31-21. I'm going to go 27-17. So we are both predicting a 10-point victory. Let us know your predictions in the comments and what you're looking forward to most this Sunday.
Closest prediction in the comments gets a numbered Josh Allen card in a one-touch protective case sent by the one and only Scott Kinmartin.
This is true. And here is another print. It's not an actual card because all of my cards are out in the garage. I will have to bring those all in. I actually want to do an episode where I seriously go open up every single card and show it out of my collection of Josh Allen, and then put all but a handful on the market. Literally just sell them. Yeah, I think that'll do it. I'm excited. I think my fantasy teams are in pretty good shape, although Austin Eckler's out. Nick Chubb's obviously out for the year. Derrick Henry's in. Who else am I looking for? I've got Josh Allen.
In decent shape, except I just can't get over the fact that my league can't agree on having 6 bench spots instead of 5. But
yeah, I mean, as much as they want to hoard, they don't want you to hoard those extra players.
They want them
on waiver. I know you do, and there are pros and cons to it. Like if you look in the Yahoo league that I have, that you have with me, you'll see that there's hardly anyone there owned above 40%, among all of Yahoo leagues, because we are all sitting on 6 on our bench in addition to 2 IR spots. So it becomes a little more challenging. I actually kind of like that. And maybe that's what you want too.
That's what I want. Yeah.
Well, what do you want to say to Bills Mafia?
Don't forget to pound some Labats. Jump through some tables responsibly, and as always, take a few hydration breaks. Let's get the W at FedEx Field.
All right, man. Here, we got to do a cheers. Let's go.
Buffalo.
You got me feeling like I'm Josh Allen. Yeah. What? You got me feeling like I'm Josh. Okay. You got me feeling like I'm Josh Allen. Yeah. Josh. Got me feeling like I'm who? Josh. Yeah. Josh Allen.